Welcome to Wolf 26 News at 10 o'clock, bringing news to you from our headquarters in Boston. I'm John Burgundy.
And I am Cement Tamlin. Tonight's stories are on the 100-year anniversary of Nelson Mandela's death.
Nelson Mandela was a civil rights leader in South Africa. He died in 2014, 100 years ago from today. He was one of Earth's greatest heroes. Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years before even being part of South Africa's politics. After that, he became South Africa's president and a worldwide example that anyone can be anything they want.
Nelson Mandela had a fight throughout his life. He grew up in a bad time of South African history. The country was having problems with racism, and Mr. Mandela did not like that. When he tried to stand up for what he believed in, he was taken to jail and served a 27-year sentence.
But he stuck in there and made sure that there were no civil rights problems in his home country of South Africa.
Nelson Mandela went through a lot of trouble to fight for his freedom.
Now, we go to Kevin Lee in New York speaking to the South African president on how he feels about Nelson Mandela and his impact on the world. Kevin?
John, I'm here with the current South African President, Larry Knight. He is here today to address the United States on the dwindling issue of racism. So, Mr. Knight, how do you think Nelson Mandela's impact on the people of South Africa?
Nelson Mandela stood up for what he believed to be right. He argued against the apartheid government. What set him apart from other civil rights activists was that he was very inspirational and motivational. He's a very righteous man.
Here's a tidbit of info. Did you know that Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years and was placed on the U.S. terrorist watch at one point?
I did know that. It's crazy.
What are your thoughts on Nelson Mandela's imprisonment?
It's outrageous. How could such an innocent, kind, and caring person be placed in jail and seen as a threat by the United States?
Thank you for accommodating me.
Thank you, Kevin. We will now go to John, who is interviewing someone in Boston. John?
I'm with Peter here. Hello, we're from Wolf 26 News, and we would like to know your thoughts on Nelson Mandela and his legacy.
I believe that Nelson Mandela was a spirited advocate for freedom and civil rights. He fought apartheid in the South African government and rid South Africa of racism and discrimination.
If Nelson Mandela was never born, what do you think South Africa and the world would be like?
The world would definitely be very different. Without Mandela, the world would still have a lot of oppressed minorities.
Last question. If Nelson Mandela was still alive today, what would you say to him?
I would congratulate and thank him for all the work he has done for the world.
Thank you for your time, Peter. Back to you, Cement.
Thank you, John. We are now going to roll some footage about Nelson Mandela.
Graph here that the number of people oppressed by the government has went from 3.5 million in 1980 to absolutely no one in 2114. This shows that after Mandela became president, he reduced the amount of racism in South Africa. On this other graph, you can see also that the number of people proud to be South African was diminishing quickly, then quickly rising up to almost 100%. Nelson Mandela has certainly made a mark on history. Back to you, Brick.
Mandela was born in Mavezo, a village near Mathatha in Transkei, on July 18, 1918. His father died in 1930 when he was only 12. He attended the Westland College at Fort Beaufort, and when he became older, he escaped an arranged marriage, then the articles at a law firm. In 1952, Mandela began the Campaign for Human Rights. He had a group called the ANC. They stood for equality in South Africa. He spent a good amount of years doing what he believed after the group had gotten banned. He was sentenced to prison in many court hearings, but Nelson Mandela still preserved, and that is why 100 years later we recognize him for his actions. Coming up, a tribute to Nelson Mandela and are bath soaps causing your teachers to eat children? Coming up next on Wolf 26. myth, the legend. He changed South African culture. He made all the civil rights issues right in his country, and the fact that we still remember him today for being a civil rights leader means that his work was a success.
We will always remember Nelson Mandela for his work. He was a lifesaver for some. If it wasn't for him, African people in South Africa could still be in the civil rights era.
Nelson Mandela is an icon of civil rights and will always be remembered.
That wraps it up here for us at Wolf 26. Good night. I'm John Burgundy.
And I'm Cement Tamlin. Good night, Boston.